Today we're going to cover our fourth day of notes for our Rome unit. We're going to pick up where we left off last class. Julius Caesar has been assassinated by members of the Senate. Remember, Caesar had gained so much power that he proclaimed himself dictator for life, and that of course sounds a lot like a king. These senators went back and found an old Roman law that stated anyone who planned to make themselves a king could be killed without a trial. And that's what they used as their justification for assassinating Julius Caesar. While Julius Caesar did have many enemies, he also had even more supporters, including the commoners of Rome. And what ends up happening is we get a new group that will come together to fight against Caesar's assassins in the Senate. And that's going to be the second triumvirate, or second group of three men who will rule Rome. It's made up of Octavian, who is Caesar's heir and nephew, Mark Antony, who was one of Julius Caesar's favorite generals, and Lepidus, a powerful politician. They're going to build an army and track down and defeat Caesar's assassins. And from there, they are going to rule Rome for 10 years. The peace does not last. We get more civil war. Just like with our first triumvirate, this second triumvirate works together for a while, but each of the three men in this triumvirate, they're ambitious and want power for themselves. Octavian forces Lepidus to retire, pretty much gives him the choice. You will retire or we're going to have you killed. And then he divides Rome with Mark Antony. Mark Antony gets the southern portion of the Roman Republic, which includes North Africa. So Mark Antony goes to Egypt and he meets Cleopatra and he falls in love with her. Yeah, Cleopatra's back. Like we said before, she's got a thing for rich and powerful Roman men, and the two get married. This gives Octavian exactly what he wants. Now he is justified to declare war on Mark Antony. He told the people of Rome, Mark Antony plans on ruling Rome from Egypt. It's going to be like being ruled by a foreign power. And the Romans supported Octavian. So we have a war between the two groups, those who follow Octavian and those who follow Mark Antony. And they're going to clash at the Battle of Actium, which was a naval battle. This painting of the Battle of Actium was created long after the battle took place, but it shows you what the battle would have looked like. So Octavian wins this battle. Mark Antony does manage to get away, and he ends up killing himself by falling on his sword. He puts his sword right through his stomach. Not a fun way to go out. And of course, Cleopatra lets a snake bite her. The snake was venomous and it kills her. And it leaves Octavian with no challengers. It's at this point where we see Rome go from a republic, a form of democracy, into an empire where one person is in charge. Octavian, after defeating Mark Antony and all the rest of his enemies, takes the name Augustus, which means exalted one, or majestic one, or awesome one. So Octavian and Augustus, same person. He's not going to take the title of emperor. That sounds too much like king, and that could get him killed. Instead, he claims to be the princeps, which means first among equals. He says, hey, guys, we're all equal here, only I'm a little bit more equal. It pretty much means we have an emperor, though. Augustus is the first Roman emperor. The Republic is going to end. The Romans pretend to have a Senate which has power, but the Senate has to listen to the emperor. So power no longer belongs to the people. They might elect a senator, but the senator is going to be told by the emperor what laws to make. The emperor has all the power. The Romans will continue to expand their borders. They want to conquer more territory to bring back slaves and resources. And under Augustus and the later emperors, we can see that they were able to conquer Britain in the north, parts of it, the rest of North Africa, and even Mesopotamia. They also controlled all the lands around the Black Sea in order to control trade. Emperor Augustus is considered to be Rome's greatest ruler. He's going to stabilize the frontiers with strong armies, and he'll place governors in each of those Roman provinces. They're going to pay taxes and report back to him in Rome. He creates an effective civil service system to run the empire. We saw that in other empires as well, like in Persia and during the Han Dynasty in China. It makes the collection of taxes easier, as well as delivering messages from Rome to the provinces. He develops a uniform rule of law using the 12 tables as the basis. And he's going to glorify Rome with beautiful monuments and new buildings. Augustus will lead Rome into a time of peace. We call it the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. It's 200 years of peace and prosperity. This didn't mean that there was no violence, but Rome was not being invaded during this time. This is the second time we've used the term Pax. Earlier this year, we talked about the Pax Sinica, or the Chinese peace, which was during China's Han Dynasty. And these two times of peace actually take place during the same time period. So the Roman Empire at its peak consisted of 3 million square miles. 60 to 80 million people lived within the borders of the empire. 1 million lived in Rome itself. Under Emperor Augustus, the Romans will establish a uniform system of money called the denarius, which helps them to expand trade. Trade is much easier when everyone is using the same currency. Just think in the United States, if you go to another country, you've got to exchange your money in for that country's money. If you go to Europe, you'll use the euro and there's an exchange rate. This makes trade much easier when everyone uses the same currency. One of the reasons that this time period was called the Pax Romana was because there was guaranteed safe travel and trade on Roman roads. The Romans were big on building roads, and some of their roads still exist today. And it was said that all roads lead to Rome. If you were within the Roman Empire, no matter how far away from the city of Rome you were, those roads will eventually lead you back to Rome. These roads helped to maintain a vast trading network within the Roman Empire, but it also allowed Romans to travel as far away as China and India and bring back goods from this area. Of course, the Chinese didn't believe the Romans had anything worth trading for except for Roman gold. Agriculture remained the most important industry to the Romans. 90% of the people living within the borders of Rome were involved in farming. So we continue to have an agrarian society, a society based on farming. In Roman family life, the father was the absolute authority in the family. He was called the pater familia, and he would run the household. Although the father had all the authority, women did have more freedom than in Greece, especially in Athens. Both girls and boys learned how to read and write, unlike in Athens where only boys were educated. And of course, there was still that huge gap between the rich and the poor in Roman society, where the poor, they were barely making ends meet, while the rich lived extravagant lifestyles. The Romans valued discipline, strength, and loyalty. They said being strong was better than being beautiful. Power was more important than grace, and it was better for something to be useful than elegant. And of course, who does that sound like? Go ahead and answer in the chat. We'll give you a few seconds to get that in, but that should be pretty obvious, and there's a picture there to help you out. So yes, you should be thinking about Sparta. But really, the Romans combined the best ideas of Sparta with the best ideas of Athens. The Roman religion was based off the Greek polytheistic religion. So they had many gods. We call it Roman mythology. And just like the Greeks, this religion offered explanations for natural phenomena. They can't understand why there's a thunderstorm, so they are going to say it's got to be Jupiter up in the heavens throwing lightning bolts down. In the stories, the gods and goddesses have human qualities, and these gods and goddesses are active in the events on Earth. So when we think of the Roman gods, we're pretty much using the Greek gods, but we're giving them the names of the planets. So Jupiter, Mars, Neptune, and Pluto, just to name a few. Government and religion were linked, and part of that meant that you needed to worship the emperor as a god. One of the things that Augustus did when he took control of Rome was he linked his family line to the goddess Venus and said that his family comes from the gods, so therefore you must worship him as a god himself. We're going to find out that some of the people they conquer, monotheistic people, they're really not into worshiping the emperor as a god because they only have one god, and it's not the emperor. So here is the list of Roman gods that you might have heard of. We've got Jupiter, who is the king of the gods. In Greece, he would be Zeus. Juno is Hera, wife of Jupiter and goddess of marriage. Poseidon becomes Neptune, god of the sea. Athena becomes Minerva, goddess of wisdom. Apollo gets to stay Apollo, the god of sun and music. Artemis becomes Diana, goddess of the hunt. Aphrodite becomes Venus, goddess of love. Ares becomes Mars, the god of war. And Hermes becomes Mercury, the messenger of the gods. We talked about slavery last class. Slavery was widespread throughout the Roman Empire and very important to the economy. 1/3 of the total population of people living within the borders of Rome were slaves. Most of these were conquered people, although some were debt slaves. And slaves were considered property. They could be bought, they could be sold away from their family. Masters could reward them or punish them, and the master could put them to death on his whims. Okay? If he didn't need a reason, he could just put them to death. Of course, some of the slaves that we're most familiar with are the strong, healthy males who'd be trained as professional fighters called gladiators. Okay, so these were slaves who were forced to fight. As we said, the rich live extravagantly. They've got more than enough, but most of the Romans were poor and lived in tenements. These were shoddy apartment buildings, lots of people in crowded spaces, fire hazards, just poorly built apartments. The Roman government needed to distract and control Rome's restless population. They called these people the mob. These people weren't happy with life, so the emperors had to provide things to keep these poor, unemployed Romans busy. And we would say that they gave them bread and circuses. They gave out free grain for bread so that the people didn't starve, and 150 holidays a year. So almost half of the days out of the year were holidays, and on these holidays, you would go out and watch spectacular entertainment shows. And it would be free for the people. You could go watch the chariot races at the Circus Maximus. There were gladiator battles, mock battles where people wouldn't end up getting hurt or killed, where they would reenact battles from Roman history, and animal fights. They pit animals against other animals, animals against humans, and sometimes they would find criminals and chain up the criminals and let the animals do what the animals do when they're hungry. So lots of things you can go out and watch, and instead of plotting to overthrow the government, You're just like, yeah, life's not so bad. Got food, got things to do. I'm good. Here we have a gladiator battle at the Colosseum. Again, if you're rich, you get those front row seats. You get to see all the action. One thing that most people don't know is that most of these gladiator fights did not result in the death of the losing gladiator. Here you can see our gladiator who lost asking for mercy from the crowd. And most of the time it was granted. These gladiators were expensive. It took a long time to train, and a gladiator's master would not want to lose them. Now, that being said, they were willing to be cut and bleed a little bit to put on a good show, but for the most part, they wouldn't die in their first or second battle. And if they put on a good show, even though they lost, they were more likely to be spared. So how much different are we from the Romans? Well, we still like to see a good fight. These don't result in death, but we still have UFC and boxing and football. So we're watching violent sports just like the Romans did. Next, we're going to talk about Roman architecture and engineering. They were known as great engineers. This is an aqueduct, which is a bridge made of stone that brings water to the Roman cities. These were built from the mountains all the way to the cities, and they had to be on an almost perfect gradient because if they sloped too soon, the water would never get to the city. And they made use of this new feature, the arch, so that they didn't need to use as much stone to build these aqueducts. The water would flow up top, go into the city, and it would have been covered during the time of the Romans to keep animals out of it, things like that. So here we can see the different layers and layers of arches used to make these aqueducts. And they're still standing today, which shows you how good the Romans were at building. One of the problems with these aqueducts is that they used lead to line the inside of the aqueduct where the water came out through. And that's not good because lead poisoning can do some damage to the brain. And we think that some of those emperors who went a little crazy, that could be why. We have the Pantheon, which was a temple dedicated to all the Roman gods. You can see that it does make use of arches like in Greece, but because it has a dome, we know that it is from Rome. So that's an easy way to differentiate Roman architecture from Greek architecture. If it's got a dome, it was made in Rome. And a dome is just like having 360 degrees of arches. It means that we could have a roof on a large building that's not going to collapse. Don't confuse the Pantheon, which was a temple to the Roman gods, for the Parthenon, which was a Greek structure. Once again, we're looking at the Pantheon. You can see that the founding fathers of the United States were enamored with Roman architecture, and we can see the Jefferson Memorial looks a lot like the Pantheon. One of the things the Romans had to do, though, was cut a hole in the top. They had made this dome so large that when they filled in the top, it would collapse. So instead, we have a hole called the oculus. And when it rains, there's actually a pool that catches the rainwater as it comes through. So they were great engineers, but they didn't have it perfect just yet. The Romans were also huge on cleanliness. Wherever they went and conquered, they would build bathhouses. Here are the baths at Caracalla. Of course, the Colosseum is one of the most famous structures in all of Rome. It's the amphitheater where you would go to watch different events, such as the gladiator battles, and it makes use of the arch as well. Here is the Colosseum at night. Because the structure is so old, some people throughout history have taken parts of the stones away to use as building material. It's faced natural disasters and just time. You know, there was a long period of time where nobody was taking care of it. So today, you can go visit the Colosseum, and they have a ramp which lets you see what was underneath the Colosseum. during the time of Rome, all that space would have been filled in by wooden planks with sand over top. You need sand to absorb all the blood and guts that are going to be spilled in the Colosseum. Underneath, they had these chambers where animals and criminals and gladiators were kept. They actually had elevators and trap doors that would lift the different people and animals up into the Colosseum, so it looked like they were appearing out of thin air almost. If we look here around the sides of the Colosseum towards the top, we would have had wooden benches, but of course those are all gone. Weather has taken them away from us. Here it is before they built the ramp to let visitors see what was going inside underneath the Colosseum. Before they built all these cells, once upon a time, it was empty and they could actually fill the bottom of it with water and recreate naval battles. But they stopped doing that so they could build the cells instead. If you watch the movie Gladiator, which you can't because it's rated R no matter how good it is, they do a good job of depicting the Colosseum and didn't have a full roof, but they used sail rigging in order to provide cover for the spectators. It could help keep you out of the sun, or if it rained, you wouldn't get as wet. Today we've got stadiums and arenas all over the country. Here is probably the greatest one in the United States, Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech. There is nowhere better to watch a football game than Thursday night at Lane Stadium. If gladiator battles weren't your thing, you could always go watch the chariot races at the Circus Maximus, this huge oval racetrack. And of course, why do you go to the Circus Maximus to watch the chariot races? Well, the same reason that people go to watch NASCAR, for the crashes. Otherwise, people going in the same direction around a loop just isn't all that much fun in my opinion. So are we like the Romans? Well, kind of. We like watching NASCAR. We like watching the Kentucky Derby. So things haven't changed all that much. We've talked about the Roman Forum before, but you're going to need to know what it looks like. It was the center of Roman life. It's where you'd find the Senate building. And these are the ruins that you would see today if you visited Rome. Not a lot left. We still have the Roman roads. Even though they're over 2,000 years old, they can still be used. Okay, the Romans were great at building roads. It was built so that rainwater would wash off to the sides, and they would actually dig ditches on the sides so that there was a little trench that the water could flow out of. In Britain, which was the northern boundary of the Roman Empire, they built Hadrian's Wall, and this was to mark the territory of Rome's extent in the north, where Roman borders ended and the uncivilized people, according to the Romans, would live. Another look at it, and while this wall was not as large as the Great Wall of China, they used a lot of the same principles. Let's build it on a ridge so that we have extra protection. We can see further. One of the things that the Romans did was build towns behind this wall, and those towns would eventually shape Britain throughout the Roman era and into the Middle Ages. The Romans had actually gone further north into Britain and built Antonine's Wall up here, but they weren't able to defend it from the Celtic tribes that lived to the north, and they eventually moved back south to Hadrian's Wall, and that would be the extent of the Roman Empire. So that's going to be it for notes today. Next class, we will cover a religion that emerges in the Roman Empire. That would be Christianity, and we're going to see how Christianity will play a role in the future of Rome.